Hey everyone, I'm Alex.
And I'm Sarah.
And welcome to our explainer on a topic that, let's be honest, can look a little scary on an exam syllabus, the Vedas. But don't worry, by the end of this, we promise you're going to have a super clear framework to understand them. We're going to take this ancient, kind of complex subject and make it something you can actually remember and use.
Okay, so to get us started, I want you to imagine something. Picture a library, a huge one, older than the Roman Empire, filled with literally thousands of works of poetry, philosophy, and ritual guides. But here's the kicker, the really wild part. For the first 1,000 years it was around, not a single word was ever written down. So how could that even exist? It sounds impossible, right? An entire library just living inside people's heads. Well, that's actually the perfect way to start thinking about the Vedas.
And that library analogy, a library without books, that's going to be our guide today. Think of this agenda as the floor plan. First, we'll cover that main idea. Then we'll explore the 4 main shelves of the library. After that, we'll actually look inside the books to see their 4 layers. Then we'll get into the unwritten tradition, how it was all preserved. We'll check out the appendices, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with a self-test to make sure you're totally prepped for your exams. All right, let's step inside that library. So the word Veda, it literally just means knowledge in Sanskrit. And to really get this library of knowledge, you have to understand one core concept. I mean, this is almost guaranteed to be on a test. It's the huge difference between things that are divinely heard versus things that are humanly remembered. So the first category you got to know is Shruti. It means what is heard. The Vedas are Shruti. Now, what does that mean? It means they're considered divine revelation. They weren't, composed or written by a person. The idea is that ancient sages, called rishis, heard these eternal truths while in a state of deep meditation, so they're seen as authorless and timeless.
And then, on the other hand, you have smriti. This means what is remembered. Now, these texts do have human authors. They might be totally brilliant, maybe even divinely inspired, but they're still composed by people and passed down as part of human tradition. This is where you'll find famous stuff like the great epics, the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana. Okay, so this is the key takeaway, the thing you need to highlight in your notes. Think of it like this. Shruti is like a direct divine download. It's the original source code. Smriti, on the other hand, is like a brilliant, inspired textbook that's written about that source code. The Vedas, they're Shruti. The big epics, they're Smriti. If you can lock that difference in your head, you are golden.
Okay, you with us so far? Good. Let's move on and see how this all builds. Now that we're inside this amazing library of divine knowledge, we find out it's organized into 4 main sections, or, as we're calling them, 4 main shelves. These are the 4 primary Vedas.
Now, you might think the 4 Vedas are all about the same size, but check this out. It's not even close. When we're just looking at that oldest core layer of hymns, the part called the Samhitas, the Rig Veda is an absolute giant. It's more than half of the entire collection. And that's a huge clue, right? It tells you that the Rig Veda is the foundation. It's the bedrock that the other Vedas are built on or are responding to.
And this table just nails the function of each one. To make this super easy to remember, the Rig Veda is your book of poems and praise, the core library. The Samaveda takes those poems and sets them to music. It's the sacred songbook, the official playlist. The Yajurveda is the priest's how-to manual, full of instructions for rituals. And finally, the Atharvaveda is like the book of folk wisdom and practical magic, spells, charms, and hymns for all the stuff in everyday life.
Okay, let's zoom in even more. And this is a really big point, so pay close attention here. Each of those 4 Vedas we just talked about, they're not just one single book. It's more like a box set. Or maybe a better analogy is an onion. Each Veda has 4 different layers of text written over hundreds of years, and each layer gives you a different kind of knowledge.
So at the very core, the oldest layer, you have the Samhitas. Those are the hymns and mantras we just mentioned. The next layer out is the Brahmanas. These are prose texts that explain the rituals from the Samhitas in detail. Then you get the Aranyakas, or the forest texts, which are more about meditation and symbolic interpretations. And finally, the last and most philosophical layer, the Upanishads, which dive into the really deep questions about reality, the soul, and the universe.
Hey, can I jump in with a quick pro tip? This is a classic exam trap, so write this down. Don't mix up the Brahmanas with an A at the end and the Brahmins with an I, N. The Brahmanas are the texts, the guidebooks. The Brahmins are the people, the priests who use those guidebooks. Got it? Texts versus people. It's an easy mistake to make.
And that final layer, the Upanishads, is just so important. As the scholar Wendy Doniger points out here, they are literally the foundation for so much of later Hindu philosophy. So even though the entire Vedic library is massive, the Upanishads are the part you'll see pop up again and again in your studies because their influence is just enormous.
Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. We've got this massive library with 4 big shelves, and on each shelf are books that have 4 distinct layers. But that brings us right back to that first puzzle. How in the world was all of this kept safe for 1,000 years without writing it down? This is where we get to the unwritten tradition, and honestly, it's one of the most incredible stories of human memory you'll ever hear.
First, just look at this timeline to get a sense of the scale we're talking about. The oldest part, the Rig Veda Samhita, was being composed around 1500 BCE. That's 3,500 years ago. The other parts were composed over the next 1,000 years. It wasn't until after 500 BCE that this huge body of knowledge even started to be put on paper or, leaves.
So how did they do it? How did they pull this off?
Well, they had this unbelievably strict system of oral transmission. I mean, this was not like just memorizing a poem. Priests used all these complex mnemonic tricks and would recite the texts in up to 11 different ways. Forwards, backward, skipping words, all as a way to cross-check for errors. And here's the really mind-blowing part. It wasn't just about the meaning. It was about getting the sound perfect. The phonetics were considered sacred, like the actual sound waves of creation. It was all about getting that vibration exactly right.
Okay, so eventually, this incredible oral library did get written down. But as you can imagine, after centuries went by, the language, Vedic Sanskrit, it became really archaic. Kind of like how we need footnotes to read Shakespeare today, right? So, a whole new set of texts had to be created, basically appendices or study guides for the original library.
And these are called the Vedangas, which literally means the limbs of the Veda. Pretty cool name. They're basically 6 sciences that were designed to help people study the original texts correctly. They cover phonetics to get the pronunciation just right, grammar to get the structure, even astronomy to time the rituals perfectly. For us as students, you can just think of the Vedangas as the world's first ever official set of study guides and dictionaries for the Vedas.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground. Let's head into our final section and just boil this all down to the absolute must-know facts for your exam. This is the good stuff, the stuff for your flashcards.
All right, let's do a rapid-fire review. Here are the 5 things you absolutely have to remember. Number 1, Veda means knowledge. Number 2, the Vedas are Shruti, that's heard or divine, not Smruti, which is remembered human tradition. Number 3, there are 4 main Vedas, the Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. Number 4, each of those has 4 layers, moving from ritual all the way to deep philosophy in the Upanishads. And number 5, they were passed down orally for over a millennium, with insane accuracy, because the sound itself was sacred.
Okay, this is your chance to really make this information stick. Seriously, go ahead and pause the explainer right now. Try to answer these 4 questions, either out loud or just jotting down some notes. It's the absolute best way to check if you really got it. Go on. We'll be here when you get back.
So as you go on with your studies, here's our final thought for you. Remember that the Vedas aren't just a bunch of ancient texts. They're a living soundscape. They come from a tradition where the actual vibration of a word has just as much power and meaning as its definition. So when you think of the Vedas, don't just picture a dusty old library. Picture a library of sacred sound, preserved perfectly for thousands of years. You've got this. Good luck with your exams.